President Trump cruises to victory with a record-breaking Republican turnout.
Trump got more total votes than Obama got as an incumbent.
Republican turnout operation in Texas is extraordinary.
Complete domination.
Receiving more primary votes than any sitting president.
We're winning. We're winning all over.
We had record turnout for an incumbent president.
The Republican Party has never been unified like it is now.
Turnout was also huge for Donald Trump.
President Trump celebrating a record-breaking victory.
It's not even a party, it's a movement.
More than President Obama had by a wide margin.
Let's realize how good Donald Trump's political operation is.
To all Americans tonight, I'm with you, the American people. I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. And we are going to keep America great.
Hello and welcome to another edition of War Room Weekly here on Team Trump Online, where we compare the records of President Trump and his great record of achievement on behalf of the American people, and Joe Biden and his disastrous record of failure in the past and his terrible ideas for the future. I'm Tim Murtaugh, the communications director for the Trump 2020 re-election campaign, and today I am joined by Katrina Pearson, senior advisor to the president's re-election campaign. Katrina, glad to have you with us.
Great to be here, Tim.
And also Erin Perini, the Principal Deputy Communications Director for the Trump campaign. Erin, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tim.
Now, as we know, the president had built up the American economy to a position that it had really never seen before, achieved such great heights, the best economy that anyone alive could remember. And it was artificially interrupted by this coronavirus that the entire world is facing. And he is quite clearly the leader to return us to that stature. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has a really bad history with job creation throughout his 4 decades in office in Washington, D.C., and he's got some notable votes and positions that we're going to take a look at today. Biden had the misfortune of speaking to the Pennsylvania chapter of the AFL-CIO this week, and it's those union members who will be so important, both in Pennsylvania but also in other states across the industrial parts of our country. And they have to be reminded, working men and women across this country have to be reminded of Biden's record on notable job-killing trade deals like TPP. Joe Biden was the lead cheerleader in the Obama administration for the disastrous globalist economic trade deal that TPP would have been, and President Trump rightly got us out of that. And he also voted for NAFTA, the notorious job killer, killed jobs all across the country, manufacturing jobs and things. Jobs got shipped overseas. Bet you he didn't bring those things up when he was talking to those union members. So let's take a trip down memory lane and remind old Joe exactly how this came to be. Here he is on the Senate floor back in 1993. Let's take a look.
Madam President, let me get to the end. I'm supporting NAFTA because I think it is a positive thing to do, but not because I think it's going to cure the workers' fears who have legitimate reason to be concerned.
And that was Joe Biden back in 1993, believe it or not. And workers did have fears of NAFTA, and they were right to have those fears, were they not, Katrina?
Well, yeah, Tim, it's undeniable that NAFTA wiped out manufacturing jobs in the United States and literally decimated the Rust Belt. And Joe Biden gleefully advocated for many policies where millions of jobs were lost, and it economically crippled families for a generation or more. But as you're right, he didn't stop there, Tim. I mean, he has been overseeing the aftermath and then continued under the Obama administration to advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership during his tenure as vice president, which would not have only killed jobs, more jobs, it would have given international authority over our wages and environment. And his unwavering support of these transnational progressive agenda items, if successful, would have negotiated away our national sovereignty. But Joe Biden's pro-populist heroic image stands to now be fully vetted by a president who has spent a lifetime signing the front of paychecks against another establishment career globalist politician trying to restore the status quo.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we all know that Joe Biden is going to cross the country this year and masquerading as some sort of blue-collar hero, when in fact his record is exactly the opposite. Having a hand in TPP, championing that, and voting to support NAFTA and get that into law, it just belies any claim that he would have to be trying to build jobs. Erin, you want to weigh in here?
Well, that's right. Joe Biden, for almost 4 decades, has been at the forefront of disastrous trade policies in the United States and killing jobs in this country. Between 1994 and 2010, the United States lost almost 683,000 jobs to Mexico. He was at the forefront of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which has moved jobs out of the United States and to other countries. It is unbelievable that Joe Biden tries to parade around as a middle-class American when in all fact, all he has done is kill middle-class jobs in this country. Katrina's right. The economic devastation under Joe Biden, not only as a senator, but as vice president, has been felt for generations.
Yeah, and luckily for Americans, we have a president in Donald J. Trump who actually makes promises and then keeps them. You know, he was on the campaign trail in 2015 and 2016 saying that he was going to do away with NAFTA and replace it. And thanks to his record of keeping promises, he did exactly that. We now have a new trade deal in place with Canada and Mexico, the USMCA. President promised he was going to do it, and he did it. Let's hear from the president.
After NAFTA's adoption more than 25 years ago, the United States lost nearly 1/4 of all of its manufacturing jobs, including more than 1 in 5 vehicle manufacturing jobs. Think of that. 1 in 5 jobs lost so needlessly. Thousands of factories were shuttered. Millions of manufacturing jobs were destroyed. And entire communities were devastated, from Ohio to Pennsylvania, Michigan to Maine, and California to North Carolina, devastated. 2 decades of politicians ran for office vowing to replace the NAFTA, and this was a catastrophe, the NAFTA catastrophe. Yet once elected, they never even tried. They never even gave it a shot. They sold out. But I'm not like those other politicians, I guess in many ways. I keep my promises, and I'm fighting for the American worker. And we're all fighting for the American worker. Everybody here is fighting for the American worker. 6 days ago, I replaced NAFTA and signed the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement into law. The USMCA will create nearly 100,000 new high-paying American auto jobs and massively boost exports for our farmers, ranchers, and factory workers. It will also bring trade with Mexico and Canada to a much higher level, but also to be a much greater degree of fairness and reciprocity. We will have that fairness and reciprocity. And I say that finally, because it's been many, many years that we were treated fairly on trade. This is the first major trade deal in many years to earn the strong backing of America's labor unions.
And it will be the backing of labor unions that will be very important in this upcoming election. And we know that President Trump has the record to show for those folks. And if jobs and higher wages are important, then President Trump is the one those folks are going to have to go with. And watching that tape again, Nancy Pelosi seems almost pained to have to sit there and listen to that. I feel very sorry for her. Erin, yet another promise made and a promise kept for President Trump.
That's right, Tim. This is a promise made and promise kept. And if you watch that clip, Nancy Pelosi is sitting behind the President of the United States, who is talking about a fairer reciprocal trade deal for the United States and scoffing. She sat on the bill for almost a year in the House, stopping jobs, trying to limit economic growth in this country. She is purposely trying to undermine President Trump's America First agenda. And when we actually look at what's in USMCA, which is a strong trade deal with our top 2 trading partners in this country, you see strong provisions for labor. You see strong provisions, and the first time for provisions in a trade deal for small and medium-sized businesses. And you see provisions in this trade deal that include the strongest environmental protection ever in a U.S. trade deal. And those are enforceable protections. Those say that you cannot leave the United States and take those jobs with you to try and circumvent the environmental protections that are in this trade deal. She sits there and scoffs at a job creator and an economic engine booster here in the United States. When you look at the bill, it is pro-worker, it is pro-America, and it is unbelievable. Again, I don't know how she can sit there and be Speaker of the House when she has clearly abdicated the job to the far left wing when President Trump is truly leading.
Yeah, all of this just underscores that when we're facing this time of economic uncertainty because our strong economy was artificially interrupted by the coronavirus, this is exactly the time when we need the leader who knows how to get back to those economic heights in the first place, like President Trump did the first time. He said it. I got us there once, and I'll do it a second time. Katrina, this is no time to turn the country over to the economic policies of Joe Biden and the radical Democrats, is it?
Well, no, absolutely not, Tim. But the reason why Nancy Pelosi is scoffing is because President Trump, every day he shows up at work, he proves that all of the other candidates, every member of the other party were literally politicians who were all talk and no action, because he's been able to do things that they said could not be done, like renegotiating NAFTA. And the reason he's been able to do so successfully is because he's been talking about this since the 1980s. This is something that he actually believes in. It's not a philosophy or a talking point to get elected. That's why he was successful. So unlike the flip-flopping on the left, they always talk about they want to do things for the people, and they never do. President Trump has been sounding that alarm for a very long time, whether it's just disproportionate in trade, unfair rules and practices, and the deficits. And here we are today with a stronger economy, and you have to just take a step back and look it took a global pandemic, Tim, to take our economy back to where it was when Joe Biden was in office. So these incompetent politicians have been saying the same thing every single time. President Trump showed up and said he wants to protect our borders, bring back manufacturing, highlighted all of the issues with depending on China. And here we are today with the right man for the right job. And it turns out that Donald Trump's campaign platform was the prescription for the American worker.
Yeah, it certainly was. And you know that Donald Trump wakes up every single morning and he makes every single decision with one thought in mind: what is best for America. It's the America first approach to everything that he does that really is what America needs, really now more than ever. And that brings us to another topic. If we talk about America first, of course, you know, the country of China has been in the news because it was the source of the initial outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic that has swept the world and caught up everybody in it, including the United States. And Joe Biden has always had a soft spot for China. I mean, right now, he doesn't think it's fair to point fingers at China as the source of the pandemic. And he also has had a soft spot for them economically. And just recently on the campaign trail, he has said unequivocally that he simply does not view China as an economic threat. Here's Joe Biden.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
Now, I would like to propose a toast.
Well, there you have it. Joe Biden, very clearly, couldn't be any more clear than that. On one rare occasion when Joe Biden could be understood, he says, China is not competition for us. Katrina, does that make any sense, knowing what we know about the Chinese, their unfair competition, and the world economy as it is right now?
Well, no, but I think it does make sense knowing what we know about Joe Biden. And you mentioned that he had a soft spot for China, but I disagree. But I think he definitely has a cold spot, a cold, hard cash is what's behind Joe Biden's love affair with China. And you don't have to look very far to see how lucrative trading off the family name of a sitting vice president could be. I mean, just look at his son, Hunter Biden, despite having zero qualifications and zero experience, seems to have made out quite well to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That's why just a year ago, Joe Biden said that China's not a threat. But That's the type of thing that a bought and paid for politician is supposed to say.
Yeah, going soft on China and not viewing China as an economic threat, all the while that his son, Hunter Biden, is profiting immensely off of investment from state-controlled entities in mainland China. I mean, that's really something that Joe Biden is going to have to answer for, because honestly, when you have Chinese interests throwing piles of money at Hunter Biden at a time when his father was the vice president of the United States, you've got to ask yourself, what did those Chinese businesses think they were buying when they were giving Hunter Biden all that money? So China is an issue, going to be an issue in this campaign, Aaron Perini, and Joe Biden is going to have a lot to answer for, is he not?
That's correct, Tim. Joe Biden, for decades, has coddled China and at the same time had blinders onto them as an emerging economic superpower in this world. He has yet to actually acknowledge the fact that not only did he shepherd and help China enter the World Trade Organization, but the devastation that came with the normalization of trade relations with China. We're talking jobs, we're talking rising trade deficits. All the while, even now, Joe Biden says they're not a threat to the country, that they're not an economic threat. But we have seen jobs time and again since China has entered the World Trade Organization with the help of Joe Biden, leave the United States. At some point, he has to answer for the fact that not only are his trade policies disastrous across the board, including NAFTA and TPP, but his stance on China is weak. And it's weak to the point that it is costing jobs in this country. Those are families. Those are hardworking Americans who Joe Biden, clearly in that tape, scoffed off when he said that China is not a threat.
Yeah, Aaron, it's clear that Joe Biden is going to have an awful lot to answer for when it comes to his position on China. These are real lives that have been affected by American trade policy towards China over the course of decades. And Joe Biden has been right there at center stage the whole time those bad policies were being enacted. And you can see clearly still today, he does not view China as an economic threat, and in fact knows that a certain member of his family, Hunter Biden, has an economic interest there. But as it happens, we very fortunately have a new ad that Team Trump has put out and has gotten an awful lot of attention this week. Let's take a look at it.
Ready to go?
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
China is going to eat our lunch. Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. The travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
That was a very smart move right there.
Hysterical xenophobia. Dear mine. Xenophobia. I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
Well, obviously a very effective ad there, and we can see Joe Biden's weakness on China. But lucky for the United States of America, President Trump is rock solid on China. Let's hear from the President of the United States.
The United States lost 60,000 factories after China entered the WTO. This is happening to other countries all over the globe. The World Trade Organization needs drastic change. The second largest economy in the world should not be permitted to declare itself a developing country in order to game the system at others' expense. For years, these abuses were tolerated, ignored, or even encouraged. Globalism exerted a religious pull over past leaders, causing them to ignore their own national interests. But as far as America is concerned, those days are over.
How would you like to have Joe Biden take over negotiations right now with China? I don't think so. I don't think so. Meanwhile, Biden allowed China to rip off America for 8 years as vice president, and Barack Obama let him just rob us blind. And we're not doing that anymore. Those days are over. The Bidens got rich, and that is substantiated, while America got robbed. That's what happened. Sleepy Joe and his friends sold out America. They didn't have tough negotiations. I look at these trade deals and I say, who the hell could have done this? If you had no business instinct, no business ability, if you had nothing, if you're dumb as hell, you wouldn't make these deals. They're so bad. I say, who made these deals? Who made these deals? But we're ripping them all up and redoing them, and they're going to be very good. Wait till you see what happens. And now that I'm your president, you see it. America is winning again, and we're respected again as a nation.
And there you have it. President Trump just rock solid on the issue of China. And, you know, everybody who's run for president over the past many decades campaigned on saying that they would stand up to China, but no one ever did until Donald Trump came along. And he got China to the negotiating table. We know they've been ripping America off in trade over the course of many decades, but no longer, not while Donald Trump is in office. And that's why we need to see him reelected this November. Erin, final thoughts.
Well, you're right. President Trump has been rock solid. And watching that clip, man, that Minneapolis rally was a lot of fun. You see all those hardworking Americans standing there cheering their president in person as he talks about the cold, hard facts about Joe Biden's disastrous record, not only as a senator, but as vice president of the United States. President Trump has put America first day in and day out, not only on trade deals, not only on jobs, not only on the economy, but on the safety and health of the American people as we go through the coronavirus. It was really nice to see that clip of a rally. I look forward to getting back to those when we can, because it'll just be President Trump, again, comparing Joe Biden's disaster to President Trump's success with America First policies.
Yeah, it'll be a really clear contrast between President Trump and Joe Biden in November. And we will get back to those rallies. Never fear. The president is certain that we're going to be back out there speaking directly to the American people, as he is so powerful and effective at doing. And Katrina, final thoughts. Big contrast on job creation, China, and trade deals between President Trump and Joe Biden.
Yeah, massive contrast. And President Trump will have the opportunity to get out there and make his case to the American public, because President Trump is a uniquely qualified candidate during this time to lead our nation. He has been a builder of buildings his whole life. He's built an army of people, and together they've all built one hell of an economy to historic proportions in just 3 years. So he has a record that we will be proud to display while drawing that clear contrast of the opposition, because Democrats, starting with Jimmy Carter, have bent over backwards to normalize, legitimize, and stabilize relations with China to the detriment of the United States. So it should be crystal clear by now that a vote for a Democrat at any level of government is a vote for China.
Yeah, and there's no question that President Trump is the one who built the economy to such amazing heights, and he's clearly the leader to restore us to that position once again. Katrina Pearson, senior advisor to the Trump campaign, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Erin Perini, Principal Deputy Communications Director for the Trump campaign, thank you as well.
Thanks, Tim.
And we'd like to invite everybody to come join us again for War Room Weekly on Team Trump Online. We'll bring you the contrast between President Trump and Joe Biden on issue after issue. And thank you for joining us here as we're all social distancing. If you want to get involved and stay involved, don't forget to text Trump to 88022, and also visit the website armyfortrump.com. There are a lot of tools there to help you get involved and help the president get reelected this coming November. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night.